They're gonna kill the love of my life.
David!
If I don't go back to what I was doing.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide. Now playing. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13.
Blog Talk Radio.
Good morning. You've reached Venus Unplugged, your virtual heartbreak hotel. This is your host, Llorraine Neithardt, speaking from a cool New York City. The heat wave has broken, at least for the day. And today we are continuing to talk about the 4 eternal feminine types. This work is inspired by Toni Wolff, who was a colleague and a lover of Carl Jung, and she contributed greatly to his work. And so she talks about the mother, the Amazon, okay, and the Hatara, and today the 4th is the medial or medial, depending on what side of the world you come from. So the medial woman, okay, or that type. Now we have all of these in us, and there are times in our life where we may be stronger in one than the other, okay, or we choose one over another. Mothers can very often be medial because they're psychic and they know what their kids are up to, which is kind of interesting. So the medial type, her orientation is about the invisible worlds. She's a mediatrix. She stands between the worlds, above maybe below, and vice versa. Her connection to the collective unconscious is where she draws the information from. Now, people who are more prone, now there are many languages for this. Somebody may have the language of tarot or channeling or mysticism, or there's many different levels. Very often these women, they will do it now. We'll want to go into religious life in one form or another, or be devoted to a community, and they can then kind of meditate and be still and get these tremendous insights. Or they can be, just people who are working and as psychics or clairvoyants or crystal gazers or mystics or medical intuitives. That's that world, all right? Now, there's a lot more examples today than there was before. I am going to give some examples through history. Now, what does this have to do with love? Everything. Because the collective unconscious is where we draw. We have our own personal unconscious. And then we have the collective unconscious. And the collective unconscious is the root of everything seen and not seen. So these women have a connection to that. Now, if they don't develop a strong ego, it just, none of it makes any sense, or it becomes gobbledygook, and which has its value too. If people want to interpret that. Okay, so these women are very, very important to our world, and very often it's repressed because it's not logical, and it's frightening. Because the person, I know in my own case, I'll trip over something, and I have no idea that it's a detonator, until I say something, or I'll say something in a joke, and then realize, uh-oh, Bluebeard has no sense of humor. I found the bones in the closet. So when as a child, when you have this, well, we have more indigo children now, so they're changing the world, and they're changing the way of communicating, because they're natural medials too. I mean, they just have that's why they tune into something completely different. All right. a strong enough ego, meaning a strong enough container for these invisible forces that work through her, it can become hysterical. She's hysterical, or it becomes more witch, like, oh, this is negative and that's negative, and sometimes people can be neurotic in kind of this negative way because they're feeling something, but they don't know what the hell it is. So it takes a lot of consciousness, meaning become aware, observing. I was fortunate because my training was in the occult for 7 years, but then came across was guided to and mugged by the work of Carl Jung, and that really gave me the language and the access, the mythology, the stories, and so that's what I want to give to you, the understanding of the beauty of that world and how we can draw on it, and how the psyche informs the external world and everything that we do in love. And since the whole universe is love and eros, that's what we're exploring here, to look at these different possibilities, whether they be archetypes, myths, stories, all of this. So one of the ways to get some benefit out of these talks that I give is just listen. Don't, let it wash over you. You don't have to understand anything, because psyche understands everything. Just let it flow through you, and it will, if it's meaningful to you, it will pop up. A question will pop up, a coincidence, meaningful circumstances, synchronicity. Okay, so I'm going to quote here from the qualities of the medial woman, according to Tony Wolfe. In Tony Wolfe's words, medium means in between, neither this nor that, something intermediate. And the lucidity of the consciousness rests upon the dark unconscious seeds out of which will grow objective cultural values. The Medea woman sees it coming. Okay. And can give it to the community, give it to the culture, but also in art or in creativity. It doesn't have to be that you're working as a clairvoyant. Okay. It's in this unconscious background that is perceived by the medial woman's structural form. She is immersed in the psychic atmosphere all around and the spirit of her era, but particularly in the collective, impersonal unconscious. She identifies herself with archetypal contents as opposed to personal contents. If the Medea woman works to differentiate the underlying unconscious values of the times without seeing herself as personally involved or represented, she can exert a helpful cultural contribution. For instance, in my own case, I suffered from anorexia and had a near-death experience, which actually brought me, and that was my first near-death experience, because I didn't understand it at the time. But I didn't have the classic issues that go on with yes and no, the wounding to the feminine. But I realized I needed to live that. I needed to go to that really cold part of hell and live that for years so that I could understand the wounding of the earth and the wounding to the feminine. So it was a living experience, and it took many years of hell and anguish and, of course, acting out and almost dying, starved to death, to really understand this. That's what I mean. So if we know the name of that devil that oppresses us, we can help others. And that's been certainly true in my own life, is whatever I know is accentuated through experience. I know that madness or that hell or that suffering. And I also know the face of the divine, because things can come as like really pretty nutty stuff, but it's the divine has entered your life rather rudely. Have you ever noticed? These rites of passage, these initiations, very rude. Just really upset your whole life. but that's the way that it is. So, in our century, this is more accepted. It's still looked upon and frowned upon, but who cares? We know we still have to do this. This is part of who we are. So, and as I said, you can have a medial moment where you just know, okay, or you can operate. In my case, it was my destiny, and I resisted it for a very, very long time until it was like, nah, too big. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I can't sing, but I can dance, so I'll just dance. That's what I'll do. And so the work of Carl Jung, okay, is about alchemy, okay, which is a very profound pathology of or teachings around the working of psyche and what is called individuation. And so one of the ancient women, okay, was a woman called Maria Prophetessa. Isn't that a cool name? Love that. And she was an alchemist, okay, probably 3rd century. And there's something called the Axiom of Maria. The Axiom of Maria is a precept in alchemy. And she also created vessels in order to do, because it was changing the dross matter, shit into gold, okay? And some alchemists, of course, were doing it literally, trying to make gold. And with the work of Jung, it's the gold of consciousness. So her let me see here. It says, 1 becomes 2, 2 becomes 3, and out of the third comes the 1 as the fourth. Now that's typical. Alchemy is like rap music. This goes this, and that goes that, and it gives you all this coding of transformation, because we're transforming deep unconscious dross matter, okay, into psychic and psychological gold, which you can use in the world. And Venus Unplugged is all about how psyche, if we understand that, both in men and women, that's what informs the world, okay? So it's attributed to the 3rd century alchemist Maria Prophetessa, also called the sister of Moses. She wasn't really the sister of Moses, or the Copt. And Maria von Franz, who was one of Jung's, who actually did a lot of work with Jung on alchemy and transcribed from the Greek to the German, the alchemical books. She gives an alternative version. Maria von Franz is not a medial. She is she's probably more a thinking and in some ways an Amazon, I think she would be. She definitely brought the culture forward. So what Maria von Franz says is one of the 1 becomes 2, out of the 2 comes 3, and from the third comes the 1 and as the fourth. Okay, now how Carl Jung saw this. Okay, now if it wasn't for Maria, and this is the 3rd century. And she's bringing out these poetic and powerful images from the collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is infinite. It has no beginning and it has no end. It's eternal. It's timeless. That's why we can draw on anything, depending on the circumstances. And as I said, if there's enough of a healthy ego, we can draw these powerful forces. Now, these forces in the collective unconscious, they have a physical impact. I know for myself, if I hit on a truth that's way too big for me to hold or contain, I'm going to get sick. I just kind of collapse and get sick for a day or two till it works through me. Now, it's happened enough times that I don't go into freak out panic like I used to. It's like, oh, I'm going crazy, because that's always the fear. Well, no, I'm crazy. But little by little, you start to realize, well, no, if I can be still and observe this and let this come through, okay, it will. So with Carl Jung, and he used the axiom, this Maria Prophetessa, the axiom, as a metaphor for the process of individuation. 1 is unconscious wholeness. 2 is the conflict of opposites. 3 points to the potential resolution. The 3rd is the transcendent function, described as a psychic function that arises from the tension between the two consciousness and the unconscious and supports their union. And the 1 as the 4th is transformed state of consciousness, relatively whole and at peace. Jung speaks of the axiom of Maria as running in various forms through the whole of alchemy. Okay. In his book, The Psychology of Transference, he writes of the fourfold nature of the transforming process using the language of Greek alchemy. This is 3rd century. It begins with the 4th separate element, the state of chaos. Well, we all know that one. Why did he leave me? Or why doesn't he be the person I want him to be? Or why doesn't he talk? But, the truth of the matter is, if we're really honest, if men get too vulnerable, we're not so crazy about that. It takes a lot of consciousness to let a man be truly vulnerable and not judge. That's deep in our psyche. Okay. So here we have. So these elements is, so the 1 is the state of chaos. Chaos always announces a shift in consciousness. We've been invited. Okay. And even if we try to refuse, if people refuse, that's okay, but they don't get anything out of it. They learn nothing and they forget nothing, and it doesn't work that way. So it begins with the state of chaos and ascends by degrees to the 3 manifestations of Mercury. Mercury is a very important divinity and principle in alchemy. Mercury, sulfur, and salt. Okay, in the inorganic, organic, and spiritual world, and because Mercury can go to heaven, earth, and hell all at the same time. And after attaining the form of Sol and Luna, the sun and the moon, the precious metals, the gold and the silver, but that's really about consciousness. Also the radiance of the gods who can overcome the strife of the elements by love. Pretty powerful stuff. It culminates in the 1 and the indivisible, incorruptible, ethereal, and eternal. The nature of the anima. Okay, and so it goes on like this. We don't want to get too much into alchemy because it's confusing. So the Medial woman, you see, I don't understand this intellectually. And I've read hundreds of original texts in alchemy. I understand it intuitively. I know that I know, but I don't know what I know. Until, a client comes or a discussion happens, and it's like, oh yeah, well that's blah 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 blah. I have no knowledge that I know this, no conscious knowledge, but it's like a it's like a Post-it. It's like, oh yeah, I remember that. I can feel it. It can move through me, and I can speak for that. Like the Pythias, they were the women that were the priestesses of Delphi. Okay, and they would go into trance states and channel all this stuff, and then the priest would interpret it. I never liked the idea of the priest interpreting it, but that's the way they did things. So, and actually, Jung's mother was a medium. He would call her number 2 personality. By day, she was the loving mother, and by night, she was the medium. Also, his one of his papers was all on. He was very, very interested in the psychic phenomenon. So there was his journey between science and mysticism are soulmates. If we could remember that. And we're in a time, probably one of the most exciting times to be alive, where as we begin to understand the nature of love and Venus, not just as sex and rock and roll, but as a living principle, so much is going to unfold, and we're going to understand so much more. Okay. Now, this Medea woman, okay, so the way that we function on this, we're convinced of the reality of spirits and should know that there's a subjective opinion that can be attacked on any number of grounds. Those who are not convinced should be aware of naively assuming that the whole of the spiritual and the ghost have been settled and that all manifestation of this kind are meaningless windows. So you're going to get one or two reactions. It's almost like cats. Nobody's neutral about a cat. You love them or you hate them. Same thing has happened with the world of the invisible. Somebody who's very concrete, that just terrifies them. And the terror becomes the attack. That's not true. Prove it. How do you prove? How do you prove it? And anything, because if you lack imagination, you can't prove anything. Because these are all, which is why very often artists, dancers, performers have a strong medial capacity. They have to become something else. Something of images working through them that wants to be born. And we know it. When we look at a work of art or we see a performance, we know they're bringing in some other level. And also the Medea woman, she or man, it's not, but we're talking about women right now. She knows, and she can invent like life-restoring rituals in a Medea quality. You know, that will happen in a session with me. I'll go like, perhaps if you tried this, because it's not logical, but I know it will move the energy that's caught. And the energy doesn't need to be understood. It needs to be placed in the right way. And then it starts to grow again. It's like pruning. Not that I would know anything about pruning. I was born in the Bronx. It's like pruning grapevines. You have to cut everything back in order to make it grow. So here's this amazing, so do your research about Maria Prophetessa and see that this has been going on forever, okay? Now, what she needs to be careful of, okay, is that the Medea woman can get overwhelmed by the effects of the collective or impersonal or unconscious and is absorbed and molded by it. So when that is like I'm using, it's the only example I really have a right to use is about myself. I can't really talk about other people. I'm not them. But, I can feel something wash over me. Or I'll just stop and stare, all right? Or certainly my eyes will change or the voice will change. And, even if somebody said, "What did you say?" It's like, I don't know. Because I'm just the vehicle. Okay, and which is why I tape everything so people can listen to it. And even in the interpretation, I can give a foundation to it. But what it means to the person's soul is what is most important. I mirror their soul. That's one of my gifts. The soul knows that I know that it's real and it's there, and it will tell me what the person doesn't know about themselves. Or why is such and such a thing happening? Because the soul is trying to have them grow. The soul is the process of alchemy. That's how it works and does its transformation. Okay. So with the shadow side of the Medea can get caught up in the collective unconscious, and also it can move from mysticism and a deep kind of understanding to they get projected, people will project witch onto them. And there's nothing wrong with people who are pagan and that's their religion is witchcraft or pagan or whatever. But it's usually when somebody says that, they don't mean it in a, like, wow, you're a pagan, how cool. Isn't that interesting? You worship at the earth religion and the goddess. It's more like, no, let's burn you. Okay. So that's the downside, okay? Or people, people who are very concretized and they have a very hard time with anyone who can see beyond or within. But there's room for all of us. That's what's so wonderful. Another amazing woman is Hypatia. Hypatia, again, was about the 3rd century. Alexandria, she was actually an astronomer. And so research her. She was a great teacher. Her father was a philosopher. And actually, psychology is an arm of originally it was an arm of philosophy. So this, all weaves together when we start looking at all of this. Like, wow, it's a beautiful, exquisite tapestry. It really is life, whether it's on this side of reality. See, that's the other thing. With death, death is just the doorway. There is an incredible force of life and movement, and it's just completely different, but it's there. It's not dead. Dead is just the name of the transition, the doorway. Okay, I just went into a little dial moment there. Okay, calm it down, Llorraine. Okay. Hypatia, okay. This is a quote. This is 3rd century. I think there was a movie, Agora, about Hypatia. Because one day I was looking at this movie on Netflix, and I was thinking to myself, that's amazing. This reminds me of that woman, Hypatia. And don't you know, lo and behold, it was. I think it's Agora. All right. So this is a quote from Hypatia, 3rd century. She too was a pagan. And it was pre-Christian, and the early Christians came and killed her. So much for the early Christians. It's all about power. Okay, so Hypatia, a quote from her. Life is an unfoldment, and the further we travel, the more truth we can comprehend. To understand the things that are at our door is the best preparation for understanding those that lie beyond. Isn't that exquisite? So those boo-boos and those heartaches and that wounding, that's your life unfolding. To the level of our ignorance, by ignorance I mean to the level that we ignore what it means, that's the level of suffering. Because we're ignoring the task, or we're ignoring what it's pointing to, because we want what we want in the way that we want it. And life is saying, oh, no, you've earned the right to grow. Watch this. So it's this unfoldment, which is painful. And that's what they say, those who know don't say, and those who say don't know. Because people go, and other people know if it's like, no, that person has suffered for consciousness. That is it. That they know it because there's a trust. And when somebody just, mimes something, or says I'm a master, which I always hold my breath with that one. How could you become a master in 3 days? 6 centuries. So there we have it. And I want to throw in Madame Blavatsky, who was the woman who started the Theosophical Society, and she was at the turn of last century, and she did the Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled. She channeled in these great masses, and she started a religion of all religions. So Blavatsky is very big, and I can't believe the English lady is telling me I got to get off here. Okay, so your hard task is to look and really feel, and when something wants to come up and you're afraid of it, just let it come up. Just let it come up. Because one of the things is woman's shame. And when we have a gift or we have a type, we can be ashamed of it because women, we have all these unattainable, competing and conflicting expectations of who we should be and not who we are. So if we call on the Medial part of us, she knows who she is. And just feel your way through that. Let anything come out. Right with the opposite hand of your dominant hand. That's always interesting, what comes out, because we have no control. And we want command, not control. So have a glorious week. Love where you can. If you can't, just disengage. And this is the summer of growth. Everybody's going to be like, remember 2013? Yeah, that's when it all happened. So next week, I think I'll still continue because I want to go over Joan of Arc and a couple of saints, and that with this. And then in a couple of weeks, I'm going to do a little talk on how to interpret dreams. How do we approach a dream? The etiquette of dreams. So have a blessed week. Bye.
You're gonna kill the love of my life.
Casey!
If I don't go back to what I was doing.
Our line of work is quite brutal and quite ruthless.
How far would you go for love?
You steal truck, bring it to me. Then you make your money.
Is it dangerous?
Of course it's dangerous!
Nicholas Hoult, Felicity Jones, with Ben Kingsley and Anthony Hopkins.
All this trouble, all this pain, for love.
Collide. Now playing. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. Collide. Now playing. Rated PG-13. May be inappropriate for children under 13. Collide. Now playing.